Start the recording. And then folks can just jump in as they want to, and they can just jump right in. So everyone, welcome to the May Parent Roundtable for Early Onset. We are very happy to have Dr. Peter Jones as our guest this month. He's very well known in the community, a man who needs no introduction, but I'm just going to say a couple things about him. He's a professor at the University of Nevada at Reno. He has a full-time FSHD research lab. He is the founder of My FSHD, a nonprofit aimed at providing no-cost FSHD testing around the world. And I know I've spoken to a lot of people who have done the saliva test, and they're very grateful for that resource that he has provided the community. So thank you so much. Again, I know you're very busy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we're going to hold this as a true roundtable. Any questions? I'll start off with a couple of questions, and whatever questions you have for Dr. Jones, just jump in. And he's very knowledgeable on all things FSHD. And anything you've ever wanted to ask a researcher, now is your time. Now's your chance. So thank you again for being here, Dr. Jones.
Thanks for the invitation. Actually, this is way more efficient. Normally I do one-on-one Zooms about every evening. And so, which is great as well. Some people don't like to ask a question in a group. So actually, if you have a question you want to ask, you don't want to ask it in front of the group for whatever, I set up one-on-one Zooms all the time, pretty much every day. So this is the best part of the day for me.
Thank you. And that's the other thing I know the community really appreciates, is that you are so accessible. You can pick up the phone and call and email, and you always are very responsive. So thank you so much. It's invaluable, the information that you give us.
Well, I get great information from you guys, actually. I actually learn a ton talking to y'all. It really is true. I learn a lot from y'all. So it's a two-way street. It's great.
All right, my phone is ringing. So I'm my sister. So I'm just going to start off with just kind of a generic question. I think we, as parents, our early onset engaged folks, would like to know, in your experience, how is early onset different from traditional onset FSHD? And why does it seem that the early onset seems to be so much more severe than the traditional onset FSHD?
So I think there's two types of early onset, because there's, by the traditional definition, it's just affected before age 10. And a lot of people, once they know they have FSHD or they have it in their family, they can think back, they saw symptoms. I've even had people talk about, say their kids had symptoms almost when they were born. They weren't rolling over right, or they weren't closing their eyes right. But it still kind of follows the traditional, maybe a little earlier than normal, but early teens and that sort of thing. But the real early onset, where you're 1 to 3 repeats genetically, and that's where even before age 5 you're getting some severe effects. I actually think it's a different disease than FSHD. I think it really should be classified separately from the traditional FSHD, and that would be, well, it's important for a couple of reasons. I think it may be important for therapy, but I think it's also important for getting kids into trials and for treatments, because it just seems like I'm kind of get off. I got to watch out with me. I get off track very easy. I'm a little ADD on stuff. But it just seems like they kind of get discarded or left out when it comes to people think about trial planning and research and everything. People say, well, it's complicated, it's more severe, so it's easier just to kind of put that aside. And there's not many of them. And I think what we're learning is that actually infantile or early onset, I guess, is more common, I believe, than people realize. It's often just misdiagnosed or not diagnosed until later. And then and I think parents are more protective of their kids and don't necessarily want them out there with a label to say they have something until you actually need help, right? I mean, at some point, if you're really severe. So why is it that way? Honestly, scientifically, we don't know, but I don't know that there's a lot of people really looking. Genetically, we know, in our saliva test, I can pick up early onset and infantile very, very easily. We see extremely low levels of methylation, which tends to correlate with more severity. You maybe have earlier onset of DUX4 expression But the weird part, I hate to say weird, I use the wrong terms all the time. I'm a scientist, I'm sorry, I'm not a medical doctor, but the unusual part is like the hearing and the some of these other manifestations that kind of come out. And it's not clear if those are just part of an earlier path of the same type of destruction, some developmentally, or if it's just a completely new sort of kind of aspect of essentially a different disease than traditional FSHD. And if I were a parent, and I'm not, so I'm not a parent of anybody. Well, I'm not that I'm aware of. I'm not a parent. I don't have FSHD in my family, so I can only speak from us as a science. It seems to me that infantile or early onset just needs to be studied as its own entity, and maybe its own therapeutics, its own approaches, just everything from the emotional and psychological aspects to therapy and natural history and everything. I just feel like and I know you and I have talked about is there a way to classify it as its own disease? Because then you can all get into trials and such for kids or therapies. And so I just feel like it's easier for the field and the pharma companies to say we don't have a lot of natural history, it's a small population, so we're just gonna not worry about it. And once we have a therapy, we'll assume it's good for the kids. Well, maybe it is, and maybe it's not, but it's sure going to suck to find out later that it's not the case. And so I don't know. I just think it needs more investigation. The genetics, it's pretty clear that we can. I mean, the genetics are pretty clear, but it's not entirely sure why you get these other manifestations. And I don't know. That's not a great answer, but it's different enough from the traditional teen to 20s onset FSHD that I feel it's a different disease. Or a different form of the disease. It's a different form of, truly a different form of FSHD.
So we're trying very hard. Our main focus really in this group is to get the pediatrics in trials.
Yep.
And we've been working a lot of different ways. I think we're working with trying to get a paper published. Kristen, you can talk about this in a bit, about doing some video I don't know if it's a documentary or mini documentaries about how it affects your everyday life, so that we can get that in front of the pharmas and the researchers, so they know just how difficult it is to navigate life with early FSHD. And a lot of times, so like my son has a 5 repeat, and he shouldn't be as severe as he is, and he's severe. So I don't know if it's a combination of methylation and so.
So it sounds like FSHD 1+2, actually. That would typically be the case. Can we check? I don't know. We can get it if we can talk offline. But
so there's a lot of different combos with, methylation and with repeat size. If there is FSHD2, and I think your saliva test does test for both, correct?
Right. So we have a little hole in the test that we pick up FSHD1. We can say you're FSHD1 and not FSHD2. If we come back with FSHD2, it's possible you're FSHD 1+2. If we know you're positive for FSHD1 and we do the testing, we know for sure you're FSHD 1+2. And if you're negative for FSHD1 testing, we know you're FSHD2. So, but if we don't know anything about you, then there's always a possibility. So, but then I look at, a 5 repeat with early onset is almost certainly got a modifier mutation that's going to be FSHD 1+2, almost certainly. There are people with 9 repeats that have early onset that are really severely affected very young. But again, we find that they have a modifier mutation. So essentially, it increases the severity beyond what you would predict. And so, I don't think it changes the therapeutic approach necessarily. It's still going to be DUX4. It's still going to be therapeutics going after it. But it changes the inheritance, meaning when your son goes on to have kids, if they have next generation, it affects that. And it's potential that there's personalized therapeutics if you can find a modifier. That's a little further down the road, but it's.
So do you have any other recommendations of what we need to be doing to get our kids into trials so that they can get the treatment if and when it is approved?
So the pharma companies that I've talked to all say the same thing. They say we don't have enough natural history study on kids to understand the disease progression, and therefore we're not going to run the trials. I mean, that's, it's and because it doesn't affect, it's not like SMA or or Duchenne where the kids are going to die. So you don't have that excuse, but his quality, I think it's underappreciated and undervalued. And this is what I think you're getting at, is the quality of life issue. And it's almost like, oh, it's just quality of life. Who cares? Well, seriously, that actually really kind of bugs me, because it's, I don't, it's just dismissive. It's so essentially dismissive of from people who have a pretty good quality of life. What are you complaining about? So you can't walk anymore. It's just, it's different. And so I think, I look at it as, if you want to really just be cold about it and say, let's just look at economics, curing a kid or treating a kid that's 12, you've got 80 years of benefit. If you want to do an economic model. Insurance companies don't care, because they're going to say you're not going to be our client next year. But from a real economics for society, these actually are where you're going to get the most. I hate to just be cold, but if you want to just break, sometimes people break it down to economics and just say, where are you going to, have the most effective use of funds is going to, the younger you are and the more you get treatment there, the better. These are the kids going to stay in the workforce, get into the workforce, get through school. They're going to be healthier. They're not going to be a burden on the system. If you want, again, this is how, if you want to just do an economic model, that actually the younger you are, the more you should be targeted for these therapies. And also, I think, so scientifically, you're more likely to respond. Honestly, you have less underlying conditions. I'm 53. God knows, trust me, I got underlying conditions. Everybody's you get older, you get people, whether it's diabetes, heart issues, all this other stuff. It just strikes me that from a standpoint of designing therapies, of trials, of effectiveness, that everything really in that teens year, maybe before 10, is kind of tough, because it's, dealing with kids just from a standpoint of people worry about maybe effects on puberty and such. But on the other hand, I don't know. I don't see why that any of these things would have. Well, and anyway, it's a different story. I honestly think this is I was talking yesterday with a clinical trial site about this exact thing, about how to get the trial. And they were actually trying to convince them that they're part of the MOVE study they're actually in a different country. But the idea is to get a niche, and that they're going to not have enough patients, that they really should go younger and start doing natural history younger. And that can be their angle on one of their angles on to come do trials here, because we're going to have a younger population to do trials in. So I think it's a hugely missed opportunity. But again, I'm not a pharma person. I don't actually make those decisions, but that's just my perception as outside. And what I've heard from pharma is that it's this lack of natural history data, and it's a really small population.
So Kristen has a good theory about kids that she mentions every chance she gets, that kids should be in trials because a lot of times they are more severely affected early onset. So you would think that the biomarker of testing DUX4 would be more prevalent, so it'd be easier to find out if it was in fact working, if the drug was working, because it's more saturated with the DUX4.
Yeah.
Did I say that correct, Kristen?
Yeah, it's not 100% my theory, and believe me, I'm far from anyone who is a scientist. I couldn't get through science class. So, when I've talked to researchers, they've alluded to the fact that it's probably easier to find the effects of the medicine working because they are smaller bodies, more saturated, and their progression is a lot faster. So you can see if you're stopping it quicker than someone who takes a lot longer to show any type of progression.
Right. So I think that last part is exactly the most significant part, which is, so the expression is always kind of tough, because it's, and we're working on biomarkers, but I think if you want to say responding to treatment and being able to slow, so if the metric for success is you're not going to get any worse, which actually is pretty much the metric for success, not that you'll get better, just that you won't get any worse. The steeper, the quicker the decline that you're in when you get on the treatment, the more likely you are to see it level off. Right. And again, I'm talking to people that just this week, talking about going several years where they just don't have any decline whatsoever. And then all of a sudden they got 6 months, they really go back. Well, so where is that in the drug trial? But with the kids, you don't hear that with kids. You don't hear about many kids that are affected that they say, oh, I was affected when I was 8, and then I was fine for like 4 years, and then I got affected. It seems to be a much more steady decline. And so that's where you're going to see probably more effective ability, like exactly what you're saying, response to treatment. I think there's two reasons you'd respond better. One, you'll be able to detect it better because you do have a trajectory that's probably a little bit steeper. And two, I think younger bodies are going to respond better. I mean, I think that's, and also you got, if you can get when there's less destruction, they may be more amenable to some of the treatments. It's, a lot of the older people that we get, they've been affected for 30 years. They may not even known it, I mean, just because, but I mean, it's just when you're younger, it just seems like you maybe are more, there's a number of reasons you might be more responsive to the treatment, in my opinion. And so I think if the goal of the clinical trial is to find out, does your drug work? I mean, that's the goal of the clinical trial. Does the drug work, to do what it's supposed to do? Then it just strikes me that that's that the younger group is the place to be. I mean, that's maybe not too severe because you may have enough muscle that you're going to get response. So it's a weird thing with DUX4 and what you're saying, as you get increased DUX4 and increased biomarkers, as you get severity, and then it decreases, mainly because once you hit a point where you don't have muscle anymore, you're not expressing DUX4. Actually, if it's all fat and you biopsy fat, you don't get any DUX4 expression. So it's kind of like this. And so if you're in that group where you still have muscle, you still have strength and some strength and you're still moving, then you should be able, you're right, you should have higher biomarker expression and a greater therapeutic range of assessment of efficacy, in my opinion. So that's my opinion. Brad, maybe Bruce would know about this actually, because what he.
I mean, I guess I would like to offer a comment. So, the difficulty in FSHD is not really juvenile versus adult because, pharma tests lots of drugs in juvenile, and many pharma now are developing improvements to treatments for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And that's largely because the first round of what I'll call authentic therapies are somewhat marginal in their effect, right? They do seem to have one, but it's not the greatest. And that's all testing in children. That's including with gene therapy for kids who are, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, right? So pretty young. And also there for exon skipping, but more so in that case for kids who are just at the sort of the preteen level and in the next 3 to 5 years would be expected to lose ambulation. Yep. And so that's the reason why they're being tested, is because there's a very strong clinically relevant outcome that FDA has agreed upon. If you can change that, you've really done something. And because of the battle that Sarepta fought, dystrophin is now considered essentially a surrogate biomarker for success in DMD. So there isn't really a reticence to test children, but there is difficulty still in FSHD, as there is with DM1, as to what to test. There's no true clinical pathway yet for success. There's great ideas for it. And we're all basically following the same idea for both DM1 and FSHD. But those ideas are really unproven, namely in the case of FSHD, if it's the DUX4 hypothesis, that if you suppress DUX4 significantly, that the disease outcome changes. And
we were no different for adult though. That's no different for children or adult. And so
it's no different for children or adult. You're absolutely right. The difficulty is identifying patients and understanding the disease course, which is a challenge in FSHD. It doesn't have to stay a challenge, however, and I agree with your point that because of the disease is amplified in juveniles, that it might actually be an easier population to do testing in. But to answer your question more specifically as to what else should we be doing, I personally like the idea that you just cited, which is a video. I'm one of these believers that pictures are worth billions of words. And if an organization such as yourself was to create 10 videos of 10 kids showing how the disease impacts their life, and if you could couple that with authentic but nonetheless relatively easy metrics of range of motion studies, and there's probably, I know that there are physical therapists and clinicians who are keen on these studies, and they would probably be more than willing to pitch in to what do the numbers say? What is grip strength? What is the workable reaching space that the child has? If they can still walk, how much can they walk? If they can't walk, that's a data point as well.
But isn't this all in the MOVE study? I mean, if the MOVE study takes people under 18, they should be measuring all of this stuff.
And eventually we will get that, right? But it's the eventual part that's probably weighing heavily on their mind. And so last but not least, and MOVE could perhaps do this, if and this is the pricier part, is if there was MRI evidence to show just what the state of the muscle was in the case studies. I don't think you have to do that. I'm trying to think about the easy path for an organization.
So I talked with Ali about this before, and I thought that this is to me where an organization like the FSHD Society should have an initiative to push this. Now that's why I've been kind of disappointed that they hadn't done that, because I think you have to have a concerted effort to do this, to say, I mean, you're saying, what can you do? But, and I agree, what everyone says is, I mean, in your industry, right, natural history, you need this data, but there's not a concerted effort to get it. And when I talk to Fulcrum, for example, they say, oh, there's just no data, so it's just whatever. And people want to run their trial now. So, Diane, you guys might want to run your trial now, but someone's got to take a hold of this as for the field and say, we need this data. It's going to be beneficial for the whole field. It's going to be beneficial. And maybe it's a move minus, younger study. I don't know. Something to get
MOVE and resolve. I mean, those are concerted efforts to try to get greater clarity around the data. And you're right. And I think it is mostly adult. And I think there should be also effort.
The MOVE study does welcome any age. And so we are actively promoting and recruiting. We actually have a webinar on Thursday that is all about the MOVE study, where we are actively speaking in life into the fact that we want and need younger participants in the MOVE study.
So that's a great point, I think, is to get those kids into the study and,
absolutely.
and to reach out to parents and say, I know this feels like work, and it is. It's hard having a kid who's disabled. It's a lot of work. And now you're saying you want me to participate in a study like this, but it really does move the field forward.
Well, I guess what I've seen is that everyone's welcome, but I want to see a concerted effort that says really to actively recruit and say, you really need to be here, and this is why you need to be here for the kid, because this natural history is what we really need to really actively pursue that. And so maybe you have, but I'm not part of the group you probably contact. So
yeah, we actively push that actually in all of our emails. We have several hundred families that are a part of our early-onset FSHD group, which we only have launched just this. It's still new, but that's a key focus and something Ali and Kristen and the rest of us have really tried to speak life into. And so we are very actively promoting that to all. While there's a small number on the screen, we have several hundred that participate in this group more offline, avail themselves of the resources, get the emails, and every single one we are constantly pushing that we need.
Because that's really the answer.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer is because that is what the companies, let's get back to what Bruce said, what are you going to measure? And I think, it's the same problem with that and all the FSHD, whether it's adult or early, but they want natural history. They want to feel for what's going on. I think it's just they may have better success with the adolescents, just because there's going to be less variability when it's early onset, and it's especially over a 3-year study, you're going to see a trajectory. Whereas, I talk with some of my friends that have FSHD, they're in their 40s. They said in 3 years, you may not really see much in 3 years for the traditional course. And so I think it's just really important. And as Bruce mentioned, pharma's not afraid of kids. I wasn't saying they're afraid to test kids. It's just an FSHD, they're not. It's out, 18, under 18 is pretty much, you got to be over 18. And there's no actual reason. I mean, yeah, the Duchenne trials are all kids. SMA trials are kids. There's, the congenital trials are kids. So it's, there's no reason farmers not opposed to it. It's just It
is a different burden of preparation for the trials that they have to get ready for in order to treat juveniles. So there is additional tox evaluations that have to be made. It's not that they're against doing it, but it might not be the first place they start.
Well, if you have an option, other diseases don't have an option, right? I mean, that's really what it comes out to.
And I think one further point too, with respect to, why is it more severe? And Peter's mentioned some good and interesting points about repeat number, the possibility that it's a combo of FSHD 1 and 2. But it's worth noting that in most muscular dystrophies, and I'm thinking DMD, certainly DMD, DM1 as well FSHD, it's really a spectrum disease in all cases. And in the case of DMD, by happenstance, the two ends of the spectrum got labeled different diseases. Duchenne versus Becker's muscular dystrophy, but they are in fact the same disease. There's different mutational causes, but it's fundamentally the same disease, where you go from individuals that have, in the most severe case, have zero dystrophin by all reasonable measuring techniques, to those that have small percentages, or maybe even into the low, 10%, depending upon the mutation. And then that bridges into what we call Becker's muscular dystrophy, which is also a severe disease, but one in which the individuals live longer, and they may even live a natural life, albeit with disability. The same is true with myotonic dystrophy. It's true with SMA. It's true with all manner of muscular dystrophies.
But with FSHD, what you get with that's what I mean. There's the early onset, which is kind of the same, but then there's the infantile in some ways, maybe, which has the additional manifestations you just don't see in other things. So that's why I think in that respect, it's somewhat of you never see those manifestations in the tradition. Well, actually, you do sometimes actually.
And it's not clear if.
We should let the parents talk. We got more questions. Sorry, we're dominating.
Okay.
No, this is great. Keep going.
Okay, I don't know. I just want to make sure everybody's cool. We can get a couple of scientists together. We'll just yap forever.
I just want to mention one thing. The U of R registry, Dr. Katz works with Dr. Twill at the University of Rochester, and we're actively promoting with parents to get their kids registered in that registry as well, because she is going to try and pull all that data and do a retrospective and sort of prospective study from the juveniles in that U of R registry. So we've been promoting that every email as well, along with the MOVE study. And I think eventually she's going to publish a paper on early onset / infantile based on the information out of the U of R registry. But we need more pediatrics in there as well.
So I'm curious. I'm going to ask you all a question then. So one of the reasons we do our testing and we keep it as a research test is because it's off the record, right? And I worry that there's a lot of these kids are out there not diagnosed, or if it's in the family knows they have it, and but they're not getting on anything because they just don't want it on the medical record. And so it's a catch-22, right? Because you want, I wonder if in these registries, if they can get, I don't know if there's an unofficial registry, if there'd be a way if people did their testing through us of their family and said, okay, you're clearly FSHD, here's your numbers, you were affected before this age, here's whenever, and that was included. If that's, for the registries, if they would, like a non-medical, it's kind of a weird thing because these medical centers want everything official, but if that's preventing people from joining and then everyone says, gee, there's only 50 kids in the whole country that have FSHD, we're not going to bother with that. Actually, the number is 1,000, I'm just curious if it's a testing issue and a privacy issue.
Well, Dr. Katz did say, and we just learned this recently, that if you have a parent or a close contact, like a parent that is diagnosed with FSHD, but the child is not, you can register and the child under the parent as like a connected, and it's not an official diagnosis, just goes in the registry. It's purely for research. So parents should do that if they don't. But that's an interesting point though, Dr. Jones, if we could get your testing and the U of R registry to work together.
Yeah, I mean, I know Twill, we work with those guys. I meeting with them yesterday. I mean, it's honestly,
I think that'd be a game changer.
Yeah, we're doing all the testing for the MOVE study. The thing is, I may have more kids in my database than they do because I have all the unofficial, and we of course don't share anyone's data, but
I'm sure you do.
We were advised not to test siblings. In fact, our genetic counselor advised us not to test the siblings in case they have it, but there's no manifestations, because it then would be obviously in their medical record and could impact life insurance later in life.
Yep.
So we were told not to test unless they had severe symptoms.
And I think that the issue is, so again, I was just talking about, I talk about these things all the time with industry and with other things, is, for natural history, if you wait until you're so affected that you really have to go for intervention, we're kind of missing these early stages.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons I do my testing, and people have told me that it's unconscionable that I test kids. I've been called a lot of things, but I mean, because there's no therapy, they want this idea of, oh, you're growing up with this black cloud over your head. But I look at it as, if we could detect it very early, and you're gonna, one, you might know something's wrong and not go in for some idiotic surgery, but two, that natural history, learn it from the very early stages, from whether it's from MRI, and then also when therapies come, those are the people you want to be on the therapies right away. I mean, before the destruction, you want to get people before the destruction. So everything is beneficial if you can find people early on. Mentally, I think it's good, because what I found in families is, if there's FSHD in the family, every time the kid falls down, they think, oh my God, my kid's got FSHD. And sometimes the kid's just clumsy because kids fall down. So I think there's a lot of benefit to doing it, but doing it as a research test, because then it's not on the medical record, because one, you don't know what the answer is going to be when you first get it, and two, everyone wants it to be healthy. But so I think there's a lot of benefit. This is why we've kept it as a research test. And then if we could leverage that into being more beneficial for the community while keeping it off of the medical record, we're all for that, because I think it helps. We want to help everybody we want all the positive without the negative. Maybe we're just getting greedy, but
So I'm pretty sure that the National Registry, hi Peter, by the way, in Rochester will, because it is a research study, and if I know this because we funded them to genotype, because a few years ago, more than half of the people in the registry had not had genetic testing. And so we said, well, we've got to change that. And so Dr. Tawil sends their samples to Leiden, because he collaborates with the group there. And that's all done under research. So they get a genetic diagnosis through them, but it's not it doesn't go on their clinical record. So I think they should be able to do the same thing for people who've got their testing through you, Peter. I don't know if you discussed that with.
Well, no, I mean, we're kind of, we know me, I'm always a little bit weird about things, but like in Australia, we just let people do whatever they want. I know if people, once I return a result to somebody, they can do whatever they want with it. I just don't want it. To me, it's between me and you, or me and the parent.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And, we're doing the MOVE study, but that's de-identified to us. So from my perspective, if someone had kids, and they had 5, and they wanted them all checked for their own personal and, peace of mind, then we can do that. And we also check people and hold the results, because sometimes the parents just aren't ready and they want to wait until they're seeing something, by the way, just so it's out there. But then if they want to, if there's a way for the registry to put this in, to say, here are some, because at least for a prevalence number, to say how prevalent is this? I think it's the community's welcome to give their, I mean, I don't know if we need a formal, to me, it becomes a legal issue about a formal. I mean, I don't want to give I don't know about if I'm allowed, I don't want to give any information to anybody. Well, I mean, I think a parent can give their information to the registry of the kids and say, this is a research result. I don't know if I'm just muddling what I'm trying to say, but I think it's totally doable.
Yeah, I agree. I think
So
so.
one question that comes to mind is, Allie's been beating this drum for quite a while now, and getting parents to get more involved and getting their kids tested and all of that. But it's just been kind of this lone voice of hers out there. Is there any way to get either you, Dr. Jones, or Bruce, or someone who's got this knowledge that's beyond Allie, to endorse what she's saying, to validate, like, this is the right path, parents, get on board?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think
We're doing that.
I'll just say that I think there's a lot. Again, I know my database that I got. There are a lot of. I think there's just a lot. There's a whole kind of underground community of people that, and I think parents are just terrified of. One, it sucks, right? If you get back to, you're scared of getting them tested, even if you kind of know what the result is, and then you're just worried about the future and what's going on. And until you need help, and until there's a therapy out there, I think a lot of people just want to stay off the radar. And I'm not sure how. Not being a parent, your number one thought is your kid, I'm guessing, but on the other hand, you want to help them. So you got to convince people this will help.
That wasn't saying that's what we thought. That was just saying that our doctor really pushed us away from it, although we wanted all of our kids tested.
Yeah.
No. So just making sure, I wasn't saying I was against it, but yeah, that was something we were kind of taken aback. I'm in the healthcare industry, and I was kind of shocked by that as well. So.
I'm glad you said that, because actually, no, seriously, one of the things I get from talking to all of y'all when on the phone and everything I'll be recorded and I'll say this: healthcare is a disaster. And I mean, the horror stories I hear from people about the diagnostic and things, but the advice that they're getting from some supposed neurologists is just horrible, or genetic counselors, and in my opinion, horrible. It's just, but I think there's one thing to provide information and to provide options, but to steer, I don't know, it's I guess to tell people don't get it's, you want to, the job should be, here's the benefits, here's the negatives, here are the options, you're the parent, you decide. That should be.
Well,
so
that's an interesting,
is the question, should there be an advocacy case for getting people tested young? Is that the question?
I think there should be. I think that is the question. How do you do it? How do you get that? How do you advocate for that?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it has to be with regard to genetic counselors. They have it drummed. It's like their idea of this best practice is it's drummed into them, and we have to overcome that. What?
They tell them don't test anybody till they're affected.
Exactly. And that's, I think we need to come up with a strategy to fight that and educate counselors and get the profession really to change their current best practice on that. I think that's really going to be important. And that's, there are obviously stakeholders way across FSHD. A whole multitude of genetic conditions where early intervention is going to be important.
I think though it's really interesting, because I talked to a lot of people. First off, medical doctors initially hated us. Now I got a lot of medical doctors that send me cases. I'm also now getting some genetic counselors around the country I have some they just keep sending me, and I actually prefer it that way. It's great when it comes to the genetic counselor. It's off the record. Then they have someone that's a professional. We can talk to them. They understand my test. They can talk to the family. I'm not really trained. And I'm really been thrilled that in the US, this has always been the case internationally, where medical centers send me their cases. But in the US, genetic counselors have started sending me people, referring people to me. There's centers, there must be, maybe 10 centers right now where they send me their cases with anyone that's suspected. And then the people have the information. Then they can decide if they want to go through official testing and have it on their record and pay for the cost. And, so it is actually, I think they're appreciating more that there's benefit to it. I think the initial thing is getting tested, juveniles getting tested for any genetic disease is a black cloud, what they call black cloud or something like that. They think it's only negative, and it's like, this can actually be positive, and this can be a positive effect on you.
Absolutely. So I wanted to ask a question, I guess, for the parents here, because I think getting the genetic testing is one big step, to go through. but then actually enrolling your child, knowing that they have FSHD, but maybe, mildly affected that point or whatever, when you enroll them in a study like MOVE, now like it's really in your face. Now you have to really embrace the fact that your child has FSHD, and they're going to go through assessments to measure their progress. And I think psychologically that's very difficult. And but I wanted to ask the parents here, what have they enrolled their children in a study or have thought about it and reflected on what if you haven't, what's keeping you back, or if you've talked to other parents about it. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Julie, you should answer this because you just enrolled your kid in MOVE.
Yeah, no, we just did. We enrolled our son with a MOVE study in University of Texas, Dallas Medical Center with Dr. Trivedi. It was good. It's been in our face for 5 years. We've kind of been trying to not focus on it, try to give him as much of a normal childhood as possible. But at the same time, we've always wanted to do everything we could to help if there was any way to find a cure or treatment or anything. And so this was something that we found out about, I guess, maybe January, February on one of these Zooms. And so our son went. And so we were grateful to be able to do something to help get closer, since he's not 18, the little we can do. So yes, I don't remember what else you asked, June. I haven't told anybody really else other than on here on the Zoom.
Yeah, no, I was just, I just wanted to get people's experience. I mean, that's fantastic that, when you heard about the MOVE study and you did take that step, and that's incredible. And that's a story I think it would be really valuable to share with other families, because you are in their position and you've made that particular choice, and to share your thought process and how, I think is really important. But I'm wondering if for others, if if you're on the fence about it, or maybe at some point before, I mean, MOVE hasn't been around that long, so there haven't been that many options for.
But it kind of
families
depends
to
on the
enroll
kid,
children.
right? Then the response. 'Cause
Yeah.
again, talking to a lot of people, I've had parents say, my kid won't come out of the room now that, well, totally disconnected, totally. And other people, one has told me that her son hates her because, these are really negative reactions. But then there's other people that are just where they change their everything. Just, I mean, it's just different reaction. Kid's tough enough to be a kid. And nowadays it's really tough. I mean, but it's just tough enough. And so I think it just really maybe depends on the response of and maybe if it's in the family already, it's a different response than if you have siblings as well, are you in it alone? I don't know. It's just so much, even adults have trouble coming to grips with it, I mean, they can, so it's a hard ask, to accept that you're different from your friends, and it's hard enough, right? Being a kid's hard enough. I don't know.
But Dr. Jones, would it be as simple as just to get your study kind of married up with U of R, that when you send out the results to maybe mention, now that you have this unofficial result, or I don't know how you word it, that you can refer them to U of R, that they could get in this thing to help the community? And it's not going to be in their medical records. This is all for research. I mean, can you just counsel them or include it in the packet?
Right. So I'm always very hesitant because I'm not a medical doctor, and I'm always very careful, but I think you're exactly right. I think that just about everybody, I mean, it's always tough returning the results. There's no kind way to return the results. I talk to everybody that wants to talk, offer to meet with every single person by Zoom. And oftentimes, though, they want to know, normally it's what can I do, nutrition, what can I do, exercise, how can I help? But you're right, that should be part of it. Part of it is that okay, your kid's 12, they're not gonna be eligible for clinical trials. And we're not gonna, for 6 years, whatever, what can you do? Well, we can, you can join this study. This is something you can do to help. You can join a study, and this can actually benefit yourself as well as the rest of the community. You're right. That is something that I should be doing, is bringing that more. I just always, yeah, you're right. I should be doing more of that, and I should put it out on my, well, one thing, if any of you guys, I don't know if you guys know, I do a podcast that actually is now getting kind of around a bit. If y'all, several, I think you asked me about doing infantile. Some people in Canada have asked me about doing this as well, about doing something about what can be done with kids. People are really motivated when it's their kids, than when it's themselves. So maybe we just need to put something together and just really make an effort and to say I can do a better job of putting this out there, put it out on my site, get it out, and about the benefits, expanding on the benefit. The benefit is you'll know what's wrong. You'll know if you're a kid, you'll know what's wrong. You'll know, but also you can do something about it. Not just nutrition, but you can do something for the community. Yeah, I really should do a better job of that. I haven't been doing that, so you're right.
And actually, that's a good segue, because I wanted to ask you about one of the podcasts you had with this Canadian nutritionist, and he was a researcher, and he talked about, you guys were talking about quality of life while we're all sort of living our life and waiting for a treatment or a cure, things that we can do to keep ourselves as healthy as possible, our kids as healthy as possible, as mobile. And I know you're not a medical doctor, you can't say take these supplements, but I just wondered if you could kind of recap that my understanding is he researched these supplements, and he is going to, in fact, come out with a muscular dystrophy cocktail probably within the next year that maybe he'll put out. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, so Mark Tarnopolsky is a neurologist up there at McMaster in Hamilton, up in Canada, and McMaster University, and we're actually working with him with some of our, we're proposing some models, but he has a cohort of 450 FSHD patients he's been following. He's been doing for 20 years. He's been doing clinical studies on the benefits of some nutritional health, understanding it doesn't treat the root cause of the disease, but the idea that you can improve muscle health and to be better, have better muscle health, and you're in a better condition when therapies come. And this is, aging is a muscle disease, so there's a lot of so things that you should do, just in general, can be beneficial. And he's pointing out that antioxidant trial done in Europe, which showed some benefit, which was actually, not that different from the percent benefit that you saw in the Fulcrum trial, but that actually hadn't been done quite right, because and so he's actually running a clinical, he's proposed to run an FSHD specific clinical trial in Canada on so a series of antioxidants. But he's also been doing nutritional studies on his FSHD cohort up in Canada. And that he told me that should be results out sometime in the next year. And the idea being, he doesn't want to promote anything that doesn't have scientific backing, because, it's really, people just get online and try all sorts of things, and you may feel it's working or not working. He wants to see for sure that you're getting benefit where they measured functional benefit in properly controlled trials. So that's what he's doing, so that it's not, because it's always dangerous, right? Someone's selling something, you always got to be careful what they're, what they say when they're selling you something. So, it's a fine line between saying, some exercise. He also is, he's putting a YouTube channel up with some exercises. Right now he's got them on DVDs. He just learned no one has a DVD player anymore. But he was going to send me DVDs so I could send them out to people. But the idea that certain types of exercise, depending on what, your weakness in FSHD, people have different muscle groups that are affected. And, even talking with Chip, he was talking about, doing level 1 on the weight machines, just walking to work, just doing swimming. They're just keeping, exercising is very important. And then nutrition for muscle health. They had actually just looked at FSHD patients on whole blood work. And he said he found 17% of his FSHD patients just had deficiencies in their blood work that could be addressed just by taking vitamins, like vitamin B12 or deficiency, or vitamin D deficiencies. And I talk to people, they say, they don't really get a full blood workup. But there's certain things that just general health that you can address. He was looking at, my understanding is just looking at protein intake that you need. And FSHD, you needed about twice as much protein as someone without FSHD on the intake. And again, so boosting some protein is just being beneficial. Again, you're not stopping DUX4, you're not but you're just saying there's a lot of healthy muscle in your body. You have a lot of good muscle, especially in FSHD, different from Duchenne, different from congenital, where they have the muscles are built wrong. And here, you have a lot of healthy muscle in a FSHD. And so, maximize that. And that was basically his idea. And he wants to put together, he had some recommendations. And again, I'd say, look at my podcast, or listen to my podcast on the nutrition, because he talks about it. And he is a medical doctor, he's a neurologist. He's got all the degrees, so he's allowed to give his advice and see specifically what he recommends. But I think there's a lot of legs to it. I think that, I talk to people all around the world, literally all around, and it's amazing what some people have found that works for them. There's enough that says, and even I have a colleague that he just bought a stick shift to fix his foot drop, little things like that. He's going to buy instead of an automatic, to work his left foot on the clutch, because, just to give it exercise. There's all these little life hacks that improve strength. And the fact that you can improve strength. My friend that has his kid playing the trumpet, he has actually improved his lung capacity against the advice of the kid's physician. The kid's playing trumpet now, improving his strength in his lips and his lung capacity. He's gaining benefit from just things that you can do in life. You don't need to have, and again, you're not fixing the underlying problem. You're just maximizing what you have. And I think there's just a lot to that, especially in FSHD. So, and I think that's been underplayed. I was really pleased to see that the society is going to have someone talking about this, I believe, at the Patient Connect meeting, if I'm not mistaken. I think I saw that someone's talking about this there. And so, I think that's really great. And that's been underplayed in the field. At least I haven't seen a lot of it. A lot of people told me they haven't. So I'm really pleased that this is becoming more talked about, I guess.
Yeah, I think you make such an important point, Peter, is that we were actually just talking about this on a meeting earlier today, is that the collective knowledge of the patients and families is sometimes greater than the knowledge of the medical community, more often than not, right? Because we have lived experience, patients have lived experience of things that work. We love to call them life hacks or tips and tricks, but I think those words downplay the veracity of what the collective knowledge of the group. So, I think the more that we can lean into how do we pull that collective knowledge together through things like the natural history studies and additional surveys and feedback tools and YouTube channels and groups like this, where we can pull together that lived experience to say, this is what works for us in real time, and then circulate that back to help inform standards of care and inform research, because it's pulled together in a way where they'll listen.
Yeah,
right.
My concern is that what happens online, I think, and again, I'm not living with FSHD, but I think I get enough people emailing me. You say, oh, this works for me. And then someone says, I tried that. It didn't work for me. It's crap. So it's kind of like, well, no, that's why I think it's important that there are clinical trials. And I think we're going to see this with the potential for stem cell, potential exosome, anti-inflammatory. Not everything works for everybody, but if you have a proper clinical trial, you'll know whether there's some basis and how it was done too, because everybody at home is doing it a little bit differently. They got their own little bag of pills and vitamins and protein shake and whatever. And so if we could actually, some sort of clinical doing it with trial with standardization, and then to say these are things, there's at least a solid scientific basis behind it to start with. And then also, it's not going to work for everybody. That doesn't mean it's garbage. It just means maybe you just need to find something different. Maybe people with a different, and that's where the larger the community, the better it will be, because I even think it's going to be the same with drugs coming for therapy. Not everybody's going to be a responder. That doesn't mean the drug doesn't work. That just means you got to do different drugs for maybe different aspects of the disease. So.
Well, the other reason why I think this is important, because a lot of these drugs are right now just targeted at stopping the disease. And even if we find a cure for disease, what about the people who are already affected? How do we build that muscle back? So that's when all this stuff is going to get even more important. Okay, I've lost all this muscle. We've cured it. How do I get that muscle back?
So that's exactly right. So You're 100% right. And this is actually, no, so a guy in my lab, an FSHD patient in my lab, he's a grad student. So he's just, well, he's just a student, but he has a student with FSHD. But that's exactly right. He's like, I want his bicep back. Stopping DUX4, you're not going to get any worse. And again, I was talking with someone yesterday online, and she's like, a cure, a fix for her, she's going skiing again. Well, that's not what's being promised. What's being promised is you're not going to get any worse. And that's pretty good to not get worse. But I think you want to build muscle back. And so I think there is now an effort, and this is what Chip was talking about with Solve, an effort to try to build muscle back. I think the more affected you are, the harder it's going to be. But I think there's a combinatorial therapy. I think that there are. And I can just tell you in the research community, people are starting to address this. And this is actually one of the big reasons we made our mini pig model. I'll plug our mini pig model that maybe people do or do not know about. I made FSHD mini pigs. And one of the reasons I did that was specifically to have a model where we could start on building back muscle. You could actually, we can give these mini pigs FSHD with DUX4. It looks like, it's not FSHD is human disease, but you can give them a dystrophic muscle that expresses DUX4. And I think that that's an ideal model for actually coming back to say, okay, now that we've plugged the hole, we're going to build everything back up. And you just need to, I think, again, it's going to be individual, different severity is going to be a different beast. If you don't have any muscle there, it's kind of hard to build it back. But maybe you just need to stimulate it with some cell transplants or some. And, I think there's some immunosuppression, some things where you can maybe stop the destruction. Once you've stopped the destruction with DUX4, it's possible a cascade's already going. Maybe the ball's rolling downhill, and you may stop new balls from rolling downhill, but the muscles that are starting to go are going to keep going. And we should be able to affect those. And so those could be, there's a different class of drugs. And so I think the field has been so focused on stopping DUX4. I'm actually 100% convinced that we're going to be there in a few years. I honestly do. And I wouldn't say that if I didn't believe it. I think we'll be able to stop DUX4, that we've actually started this project. And I think some others have too, to start building back. We'll call it our own Build Back Better. We're going to have or whatever. It's going to be a real one that everyone can get behind. And so, we got to build back, because it's just not, it's just not good enough answer. It's better than nothing, but there's an awful lot of people out there that telling them they're not going to get any worse is a pretty depressing outcome. That's not what people are being, I don't think that's what people hear when they hear a cure. I think they hear they're walking their kid down the aisle. I think that's what they hear. They're getting up. And it's tough. It's a tougher thing, but now is the time to be working on it. You don't start working on that after we've, you don't have to do these one step and then the other, to me. And so we build the tools to do this. And I know we have some industry, we have some interested parties around the world that are doing this. And this is something that Chip's really involved with. Chip, and with Solve, is they want to build muscle back. So, it's in the works.
I kind of want to just go back to what reason for hesitancy to join a trial.
Sure.
So just trying to and I understand, but making sure people are clear that joining this trial would not be a reason you'd be excluded or a key exclusion for a different trial, or not necessarily a key exclusion, but be a reason why your child would be lower on a child who has not been in any trial, who, is who's completely untouched by trial. It's true, data. I know that this MOVE study would in no way impact the outcome, the disease, or the progression, but just kind of having that to tell parents, like, hey, your child's enrolled in this. I know at St. Jude a lot of times they'll say, are you enrolled in it? Have you ever been enrolled in a trial? That's a yes or no question. Knowing
you're actually hitting the right, you're really an important point that has not been addressed properly, in my opinion. That's actually a huge point. And this is another discussion that was just talking with the MOVE people the other day. So now I think with the kid right now, if you can't be in a trial, so the concern is going to be in MOVE. You're going to have all these people, and they're finding this out, that are on lesmapimod or have been on lesmapimod. That screws the whole trial up.
Yeah.
And the natural history, at least you have to, the idea is if you're in MOVE, you're not supposed to be in another, at least with adolescents, if the age is 18, you're not going to be in one anyway right now. So, but that, I think the idea with MOVE, and it should be clarified, is when you sign up for MOVE, are you basically promising that you're not going to be on any interventional study for the next 3 years? I think that's what their idea is. And I'm not sure how clear that is, but I have heard they're having trouble enrolling people now because everybody wants to wait, and there's adults, but everybody wants to wait if they're going to get into the phase 3 Fulcrum trial. At least for the adolescents, if you're 15, right, you know, then or under, if you go into MOVE right now, and Bruce might mention, I don't know what Dine's going to do. I don't know what Arrowhead and those guys are going to do if they're going to take people under 18. But my feeling is that nobody's taking anyone under 18 into an interventional trial right now, that it shouldn't have any impact on you to be in the MOVE study. Now, if you're 18 or 17 and you're going in, that will affect you, and it should be clarified because you need that information when you decide, you know, and that's just something that I don't see discussed out there very much. I think it's a shock to people when they find out.
This becomes a little bit of a circular discussion, though, because whether someone takes somebody under a certain age, number one, there are obligations related to juvenile testing that aren't quite the same for adult testing. So that's one issue, but to use the analogy of DMD, young children with DMD, while they're obviously affected, and you don't have to be a clinician at all to actually spot it, they walk pretty well, right? So all of the standard testing that you might do for somebody at a young age, in the case of DMD, is not the same testing that you would be doing for an older child or a young adult. So it can change the things you need to know about. It gets back to this natural history story that we started with. It's important to understand natural history. In the case of juveniles, it's very important. And if this group feels they're not getting enough attention, then you know, metaphorically speaking, you got to find a way to raise your hands collectively. That's why I like the video idea. They go viral. And
well, I think the question was about, though, it shouldn't, that's what I'm saying, but being in this study should not affect any, right now, the interventional studies are not going to do the juveniles in FSHD. So you might as well be in the MOVE study because it's not going to, right?
Right.
But if it does, would my child be my child be a participant that would be picked, be looked over? Maybe that's what my question is. That could there be by chance say, okay, in the future, like we didn't see this coming, great, there's now something, but there's this child who's never been nothing, there's no child, nothing's tagged to his name.
MOVE is non-interventional.
MOVE's not.
Yeah, I understand it's not interventional, but
so
it
if you're in the
shouldn't
MOVE trial
impact
and
your
you decide to go,
accessibility.
yeah, if you're in the MOVE trial and you were to decide to go into the Fulcrum trial, you can just go. It's the
Okay,
other way that it's the other way they don't want you to do it. They don't want you to be on the losmapimod trial and then join the Dine trial and then join the Avidity.
because
So
it's not a natural
non-interventional,
profession. Yeah.
It won't affect, it just kind of screws up the MOVE. The MOVE will say, oh man, but they wouldn't stop you. I don't think they should stop you.
They can't. I mean,
Yeah, you should be able
Yeah,
to
those
go right
functions
in.
that you can drop out at any
Something
time.
that parent could think.
Hey, you know, on Bruce's thing, have you guys ever heard of the Dux Foundation in France? Foundation Dux. It's F-O-N-D-A-T, Foundation Dux.
Yeah.
They are the best. I love these guys. They are fantastic. It's Vincent Toronto and Pierre Lorient.
Yeah.
And they are all infantile FSHD early onset. The entire organization is strictly on that. They have online, they have videos, they have interviews. It's all in French. I support them as an individual. I just think they're fantastic. It's all about raising awareness for early onset FSHD. They do a lot of, they're trying to give people activity. And I mean, they try to have these kids have a nice summer and to do things. But it really, I mean, it's the type of thing that Bruce is talking about with videos, where when you see these kids and you listen to them and they're talking about their firsthand experience with FSHD, and it's not like 1 or 2 kids. I mean, there's 25 kids in this thing. And you hear them and how can you not want to help them and work with them and learn French and go over there? You know, I do their fundraisers and stuff and talk with them. And it's just the type of thing I think that you might want to just see. Foundation Dux, DUX, Foundation Dux, Pierre Lorient, and just see what they're doing, because that might be a kind of a blueprint for the type of thing you might want to do here, because and they've distinguished themselves away from AMI FSH. AMI FSH is the French FSH. I'm not trying to separate them from you guys, June. I'm just saying as their own sort of like entity, though, to say we're just going to be 100% focused on this, so there's no dilution of our message. And I think Pierre was himself early onset, and it's just an amazing foundation on what they're doing. I would say just check them out online.
Yeah, no, I know them well. I was wondering what the exact, I heard about Fondation Duxenas. So that's really an interesting update. And yeah.
Sorry, June. Let me ask the parents. If Kristen's working with a gal who does have FSHD and she's a videographer, would you be willing to video your kid and their struggles and submit it? Is that something you would do? And how do we get more parents involved?
Well, I do think somebody has to get the flywheel started, right? So once we get a couple and we get them into circulation, I think more will come, because when they are well done and they are more in circulation, I think it's kind of like a, moth to a flame. Very few people want to be the first one to jump in. So if we can get it started, I think that will attract some more.
Well, what about, okay, so, the society's got, you have grants and stuff, and you do things. And I look at what the Foundation Ducks did is they basically said, because these kids are all alone and they're isolated and it sucks. Now here's a whole bunch of kids like you, and then they're taking them scuba diving. They're taking them seriously. I mean, they're taking them to the beach. They're doing all sorts of cool, a couple of week longs in the summer. They get all of them together. It's all covered. Someone covers the cost. But it's not just like, I understand people don't like, the MDA says they do summer camps and stuff. You say that's not helping. But in the end, it helps if it builds the community for infantile and early onset, to say one of the things we're going to do as a community now is get us out of our chairs or whatever, because we're going to join the natural history together, and we're all doing it together, all 25 of us, and to do that, if that would be a better use of some, I always complain about it. It's easy to spend someone else's money, but it's to say maybe it just comes down to cost. And would people be interested in that, to say, hey, we're going to all go down, to the Keys and go off and do some really cool summer, swim with the dolphins or something, and have it as some, to build a community of the early onset. It's expensive to have disease, to have it covered. Try to get industry. Maybe all the pharma would kick in something. And again, it's not interventional, but it is interventional because it's your mind, it's mental, and it does come back to helping the natural history. I don't know. That's what Foundation Ducks did. I think that they're a small country, so it's easier to, don't tell them I said that, but it's easier to do it maybe in France. But what about something like that?
Well, Lee, we, during the pandemic, or actually before the pandemic, we talked about having patient meetings that were really more social, about just getting together, not all the, cramming your head full of genes and proteins. You're on mute. And then and it might be something to think of, particularly with regard to the kids, because it's the kids who really, I think, benefit disproportionately from that kind of social connection.
Well, and there might be a good opportunity. There's some organizations I'm familiar with, one, for example, out of Colorado called No Barriers, and their entire mission is all about, their tagline is, what's within you is stronger than what holds you back. And so if they've got someone that's, in a wheelchair, but they want to hike a mountain, they figure out how to get them up the mountain. They want to go whitewater rafting, they figure out how to get them on a raft and provide those supports. And so there might be something we could explore because it's not central. I don't know how
that might be great.
Pull off that trip, but I think we could partner with the right people to help do that kind of thing.
Well, but we organize our own, we have our 360 meetings. I mean, I think we have the capacity to do that. I mean, I think, we might need to provide a lot of, generous scholarships for families, or, to help with travel and so on. But, back in 2012, it was before I joined, 2010, before I was with the society, I know that they did a patient conference that was focused on early onset and pediatric FSHD at the University of Iowa. And they got a lot of families attended that one. And, we haven't had a pediatric themed meeting. And I think if we did, I think that would bring a lot of people. And I think having a purpose, like even making videos, like I'm thinking we should, present that as a kind of follow on to the voice of the patient, is, in an FDA listening session. Okay, we did one that kind of covered all FSHD, but really this listening session is to focus on the special needs of pediatric patients, early onset patients.
I'd go big, go big though, and have a real magnet to say this is going to be an event, life-changing event where you're going to come and get to do this. It's not lectures, it's not just but
right,
just something fantastic and that's again what it's just to stimulate, make it something people want to be a part of, and they're going to see benefit, not just their kids are going to be excited, they're something cool, but also you're going to you're going to benefit on the back end as well. And it's not it's just, I don't know, to me that's it sounds horrible. Research has a lot of money now. There's a lot of research going on. It just seems to me that would be a powerful thing that society could do, or foundations together could do, to say, I don't know how much, it just strikes me as more valuable than $100,000 research grant to a lab that's, or something. It just, or a couple, that's, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying maybe just a thinking, because at the end, you're still getting a benefit on the back end that you really need. And the patient and the families benefit, and the families are really, I mean, that's, I don't know, that's my.
And we heard it from pharma, they like videos, so we're on it. We've gone over our time, but I just want to give anyone else one last opportunity if they want to ask anything of anyone here while we have a captive audience.
I probably didn't quite catch it, but what was the name of the podcast, Dr. Jones? What was your podcast?
My FSHD, the My FSHD podcast. I did one on nutrition a couple of weeks ago. If you go to Spotify or Anchor, or even just the My FSHD website, you can click on it and you can get it, and you can just do it online too, just download it. But there's one that says nutrition. I think it's the highest viewed one, or highest listened to one, first one that pops up.
And then one other question, the saliva test that you do, if we were interested in that, I guess on the FSHD Society website, there's a way to request that.
Yeah, there's on the My FSHD website, it says requested kit, and you just mark whether you can, in the notes, if you're anyone under 18, I have parental consent that I send, and we can do the whole family, we can do everybody. It's confidential. Just me and you back and that's who you deal with, and we don't share results with anybody. It's up to you. You can share results with whoever you want, and we can test kids. We do, if they're very young, under 5, we have a swab. There's like a Q-tip that you run on the cheeks, just because kids have trouble, and if they're anyone over say 5 is we just do a standard kit. So, and do it at home. It's in, we cover shipping both ways if you're in the US, and so no cost at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're getting overwhelmed. A lot of people are. We are they're sending us bazillion from Brazil now. It's actually great. It's actually really nice to be able to help so many people. It's becoming really good. Well, you always are free to send me emails. I'm peterjones@med.unr.edu. I'm pretty good at answering emails, pretty timely. And I don't know, Allie, what do you think? So I'd be happy to do a podcast on something like this. You want to join me on a podcast, or do some of you here want to join, a couple of y'all, or if you want to put, I just kind of wing it. I don't have any plan. If you've ever listened to my podcast, I kind of ramble like I do now, but it's, I'm kind of, we're
But
just
you have
trying
a
to find
cool
things
theme
people are
song,
interested in.
Peter. You got a
What's
cool
that?
theme song. You got a cool theme song. So
Hey, that's from an FSHDer, man.
I
He put
know.
that together, man. He's a cool kid.
Yeah, I mean, however we can get the word out, Kristen and I, about, if we could reach parents and get them into these studies, get them into these registries, join us in our fight to get our kids in these trials, to get our kids these treatments, when there are treatments available, that they are available to our kids. I mean, that's our goal. So however we can reach them through this, through I appreciate it, through your podcast or your organization, however we can do it, we need to reach as many
Yeah, I
people
mean,
as we
everyone's
can.
got-
Get a great.
Yeah. I mean, it's always shocking to me when people contact and they say they haven't. I'm like, you guys, people must be really, I don't know. I'm not a good online person, but it's amazing. You feel like there's saturated information out there, yet constantly people don't see, you know, I don't know if it's all in Google rankings or whatever, but like, it's just sometimes hard to find information, no matter how good you do. And I know, I mean, honestly, the first thing I ever did was I Googled FSHD and I found the society back in 2003 and Dan's pages and stuff, you know, but now it's harder to find stuff. So the more ways you can get out there, and some people like, you know, Chip is the guy who put me on podcasts. He's like, oh, you got to do podcasts. That's the only way he gets information, you know, information from the source. And I think that we just have to evolve as a community and keep reaching people the way that they're, you know, and of course, maybe podcast is out of date now. I don't know. I feel like I'm always a generation behind, half a generation behind.
That's their TikToking, huh?
Yeah.
15 seconds at a time on FSHD. That would go over great.
Do you have anything to add, Kristen, before we go?
No, you know, Ellie, I think we have some plans. I think the podcast would be awesome. Just having other people besides just you and I talking about the involvement that parents should be doing. And I think we can definitely work on the first phase of the video and then work towards like the extravagant island getaway.
No, I'm serious.
So-
Check out the Ducks Foundation. But yeah, I'm pitching it for you guys. Come on, we want to.
You know, but I think if the parents here are willing to do it, we can get underway with, you know, a really great documentary, if you will, that Lexi will help us put together.
Well, unless anybody has any last comments, thank you all so much for coming. Dr. Jones, thank you so much for your time. June, Lee, thank you guys. Kristen, everybody. Bruce, thanks for being here. You're a great resource. You're kind of like, you know, our insider trader into the pharma world. So
Yeah.
we appreciate it.
I'll be the mole.
So thank you so much. Whatever we can do to help, you know, further our cause and get our kids a treatment and cure this rascal, that's what we want to do.
Absolutely. Well, let me know anything I can do to help, and I'll follow up with you about, you know, we can set something up. Okay.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. See you all.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.